Now, how about citations in literature review? When a researcher is looking at published books, a researcher is looking at published papers, a researcher is looking at different sources of information. So citations have to be put in place, or referencing system has to be put in place. So citations are references to the sources used in the literature review. They acknowledge the intellectual contributions of other researchers and provide evidence for the claims and arguments made in the research. They also provide proper citations also provide are crucial for maintaining academic integrity and avoiding plagiarism. So what citations do? If the researcher has cited, for example, the Kenya National Bureau, the Kenya National Bureau of KNLS. So if you have cited a government agency, for instance, you have the agency that conducts the national census. So you want to say the Kenyan population is, let's say, 34 million or 40 million, or whatever data that has been pegged on a particular census. Then it is important to cite that you are citing the population of Kenya based on a source, and you indicate that source so that if somebody wants to verify, so one, you are acknowledging that this is not your data, you are acknowledging that this data comes from a particular source, and you are acknowledging the author. So that way, whoever wants to find out more can be able to find out, and if your study is subjected to a plagiarism check, that can be able to assist in avoiding plagiarism. So that is acknowledged effectively. Now, what are some of the key points when it comes to citations? So number one, accuracy. Citations should be accurate and complete, including all the necessary information to locate the original source. Number two, consistency. A consistent citation style, for example, APA, MLA, Chicago style, should be used throughout the research paper or thesis. If you are carrying out a project or a thesis and you are using the APA citation style, then that should be used consistently throughout that study. If you are using MLA or Chicago style, then use that style consistently. So consistency in citation is important. Then relevance. Citations should be relevant to the research topic and support the claims and arguments made in the context. Number four, integration. Citations should be seamlessly integrated into the text, providing text, context, and support for the ideas presented. So if you are doing your background of the study, or you are doing your literature review, or you are doing your conceptual framework, or you are doing, so whenever a citation is supposed to be made, let it be made at that level where it's supposed to be made in the study, so that whoever is reading that particular citation can see you have cited this under theoretical framework to support the theories on which that particular study is anchored. Then you are looking at number five, variety. A range of sources should be cited, including both seminal works, and seminal works are normally the key contributions into a particular area, recent research to demonstrate, and recent research to demonstrate a comprehensive understanding of the literature. So if you are looking at an area like motivation, then there are those who have developed theories in the area of motivation, like McGregor Douglas, you have Abraham Maslow, you have got other authors who are renowned and have brought out what you are calling seminal or major contributions to those areas. So it's important if it's in marketing, you also have authorities like hotline marketing, you have authorities in other cross-cutting areas like law, among others. So you cite, if you are doing something in an area where there are known authors, you cite those authors in terms of what they have done, relate that to what has happened recently, so that you have a variety in terms of your citations to inform the study and strengthen it. So key points about citations: one, accuracy; two, consistency; three, relevance; four, integration; five, variety. Now, what is the connection between literature review and citations? Literature review and citations are intrinsically linked. So as you do literature review, you also provide the citations. That's what that implies. The literature review involves a critical analysis of existing research, and citations provide the evidence and support for the claims and arguments made in the review. So you are writing your, for example, literature review section in your research, and you are saying previous studies have argued that employee motivation is influenced by, say, work-related benefits. So you have made that statement in terms of reviewing, but it's important for you to put a citation there to indicate who are these researchers, who are some of these scholars. So you have to give a citation so that you are now supporting that. And if somebody wants to find out what those researchers did, can be able to get that maybe in the scholarly articles or books that they have written. The literature review and citations also allow readers to locate the original sources for further exploration. A study may have, maybe if you are doing a study could have about 50 or 60 or even 100 references with very many citations. So normally the citations are done in brief. But some of those who are reading this work could want to find out further information. So citations help those researchers or readers to locate the original sources so that they can be able to verify or maybe satisfy themselves on certain aspects. What is important for us to take note of here? So it is important to note in conclusion for that section of citations that a well-conducted literature review with the proper citations is essential for a successful research project. And when citation and references and literature review is done well, it demonstrates that the researcher understands the field, has an understanding of the field, justifies the research, and provides a foundation for the study's design and analysis. So how well a study will be informed lies on how strong and how rich the literature review and citations have been done. That is what is being emphasized here, that literature review has to be done very well, citations have to be provided if that project or that research intends to achieve high levels of success. Conceptual framework. When you look at this term, conceptual framework, the researcher could be having an idea, and that is where the word conceptual is drawn from. You have an idea, or there is a problem that is supposed to be addressed, so you come up with some kind of a structural representation of what will be captured in that framework. So in essence, a conceptual framework is a structured representation of that visual or textually outlines the key concepts, variables, and their hypothesized relationships pertinent to a research problem. So when you come up with a diagram, okay, conceptual framework, when you come up with a diagram or a pictorial representation of the variables, that is what is being termed here as a conceptual framework, trying to give the person reading your proposal or the person reading a proposal done by a researcher in terms of having some kind of a sketch understanding of the relationships in relation to a given problem. A conceptual framework acts as a blueprint or a roadmap for the research, guiding the development of research questions, hypotheses, and data collection methods. A conceptual framework helps to illustrate the researcher's understanding of the problem and how different factors might interact to influence the phenomenon under study. So the conceptual framework is that structural diagram that shows what the researcher could be proposing to do. What are the key components of a conceptual framework? So there are three. So one, key concepts and variables. Then two, relationships. Then three, theoretical underpinnings. So one, under the key concepts and variables, the conceptual framework identifies the central ideas and factors that are relevant to the research problem. This could include independent variable or independent variables, those that are manipulated or changed, dependent variables, those that are measured or observed, and other mediating or moderating variables that might influence the relationship between the independent and the dependent variables. So on the one hand, the conceptual framework will have the variables and how they relate in relation to that particular conceptual framework. Then secondly, relationships. The conceptual framework illustrates the hypothesized relationships between the variables. These relationships could be causal, one variable causing a change in another, or could be correlational. Variables are associated but not necessarily causal, or interactive. The effect of one variable on another depends on the level of the third variable. So these relationships, envisaged relationships, could be depicted on the conceptual frameworks with arrows trying to show those relationships. Number three, theoretical underpinnings. The framework often draws upon existing theories and models relevant to the research problem. These theories provide a foundation for understanding the phenomena and help to explain the hypothesized relationships between variables. So if you are saying you are studying motivation and a particular theory of motivation is the one you are using to guide your study, or if you are using, for example, resource-based theory, you are using resource-based theory to carry out a particular study, showing how it informs that research. So the theoretical underpinnings are expected to be envisaged or maybe depicted on a conceptual framework. What are the benefits of developing a conceptual framework? So a conceptual framework will provide clarity and focus. So under that, it implies that it helps to clarify the research problem and focus the research on the most relevant variables and relationships. Organization. A conceptual framework provides a structured way to organize the research and guide the development of research questions and hypotheses. Communication. A conceptual framework facilitates communication of the research design and findings to others. Then prediction and explanation. The conceptual framework helps to generate hypotheses about the expected outcomes of the research and provides a framework for interpreting the results. So the benefits of a conceptual framework may include clarity and focus, organization, communication, prediction, and explanation. So if anybody just goes to the conceptual framework of a study, they can also think and try to find out from that what the researchers could be having in mind. Now, what are examples? An example of a conceptual framework. So if the research problem is to investigate the factors influencing employee motivation, a conceptual framework might include variables such as salary, job satisfaction, work-life balance, recognition, along with their hypothesized relationships. And what would happen is that researcher who is carrying out a literature review could be finding out gaps in relation to what has already been done in terms of the salaries provided to workers, what studies have been done regarding job satisfaction, what studies have been done regarding work-life balance, what studies have been done in terms of employee recognition. And when you look at that in terms of past studies, gaps could emerge in terms of context, maybe time, maybe location, maybe populations. So those gaps could come out, and they are the ones which now a researcher can use in trying to suggest a framework. So the framework might draw upon motivation theories like Maslow's hierarchy of needs or Herzberg's two-factor theory to be able to explain the relationships. So you might be saying that theory X and theory Y has had this previously. So the study that you are doing could be aligned or underpinned on the thinkings of those particular theories to be able to explain what you want to look at as a researcher or what a researcher wants to look at. Now, it is important to note that a well-developed conceptual framework is invaluable in the problem formulation stage of research. It's important, it's being emphasized that a conceptual framework providing a pictorial diagram is important at this early stage. It is also important to note that a conceptual framework provides a clear and organized representation of the research problem, guiding the development of research questions, hypotheses, and data collection methods. It's also important to note that a conceptual framework enhances the clarity, focus, and theoretical grounding of a research problem. And that's why those who are keenly looking at a study normally want to find this study, what are the underpinning aspects, what underpins this particular study, to be able to find out the sphere of maybe the methodologies adopted, and to also see what has been done and what new aspects are coming out in the current study or proposed study by a researcher. Now, here we have examples of research questions in the areas that we have looked at. And these ones could be revision questions that you can be able to use when you are going through this particular content that we have gone through. In the area of problem identification and conceptualization, there could be these sample research revision questions that can guide you as the learner. So one, what are the key indicators that a particular issue or phenomena warrants further investigation and could be framed as a research problem? Two, how can researchers ensure that the identified research problem is significant and has the potential to contribute to the field of study? Number three, what strategies can be employed to refine and narrow down a broad research problem into a more focused and manageable research question? Revision questions in the area of research questions. How can researchers ensure that the formulated research questions are directly aligned with the identified research problem and contribute to its resolution? Two, what are the potential pitfalls of formulating research questions that are too broad or too narrow in scope, and how can these be avoided? Number three, how does the type of research question, descriptive, relational, causal, comparative, influence the choice of a research design and data collection method? So this third sample question could be read with one of the types of research questions. So you could read it as, how does the descriptive research question influence the choice of a research design and data collection method. You could also look at it in terms of how does relational research question influence the choice of a research design and data collection method. So you could look at them from different angles when you are now gaining more insights into the topic and into the content. Research questions based on hypothesis construction, characteristics of hypothesis testing. So under these, sample revision questions could be, what are some common mistakes researchers make when formulating hypotheses, and how can this be rectified? Number two, how does the choice of statistical test in hypothesis testing depend on the type of data and research questions being investigated? Number three, what are the limitations of hypothesis testing, and how can researchers interpret and report findings in a way that acknowledges these limitations? There could also be sample revision questions on statement of objectives. One, how can researchers ensure that the stated objectives are measurable and achievable within constraints of the research project? This is basically testing on the aspect of scope. Number two, what is the relationship between research objectives and research questions, and how do they guide the research process? So when you are looking at objectives and the relationship between objectives and research questions, this is a question that can be able to guide that study area. Number three, how can researchers effectively communicate the research objectives to stakeholders and ensure their alignment with the overall research goals? So these are revision questions that will be very useful for you when you are looking at the statement of objectives. How about literature review and citations? So the sample revision questions could be, what strategies can, number one, what strategies can researchers use to conduct conduct a comprehensive and systematic literature review, ensuring that all relevant sources are identified and critically analyzed? So the question can be, what strategies can researchers use to conduct a comprehensive and systematic literature review, ensuring that all relevant sources are identified and critically analyzed? Second sample question, revision question, how can researchers ensure the accuracy and consistency of citations throughout their research paper or thesis? The third revision question, what are the ethical considerations involved in literature review and citation, and how can researchers avoid plagiarism and other forms of academic misconduct? So here is where we were mentioning regarding the citations and referencing in the context of the work that is being done to ensure that acknowledgement is put in relation to the source. How about conceptual framework? How can researchers ensure that conceptual framework accurately reflects the key concepts, variables, and their hypothesized relationships relevant to the research problem? So one of the things that could be done here is to ensure that the research gap, the research questions, and the research objectives are aligned to ensure that the scope is limited to that particular study area. Number two, what are the potential challenges in developing a conceptual framework, and how can researchers overcome these challenges? Number three, how does the conceptual framework guide the selection of research methods and data collection techniques, and how does it facilitate the interpretation of research findings? So, dear learner, these ones are examples of revision questions in relation to the subtopic we have looked at in the research process, which can be able to assist in the process of looking at the content and trying to see whether the ideas that we have learned in this particular topic have been clearly articulated. So that is section. So we have come to the end of that area.